Reverend Jefferson, other ministers of the gospel, my Galilee church family. It's good to be here. I'm truly standing on the shoulders of giants, and I'm thankful for it. But I would like to speak to you today on a simple idea that's been bouncing around in my head is, don't get too comfortable. I'll explain that in a second. Our scripture today is coming from Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 through 16. And it reads, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." And when I read this particular scripture, the Spirit led me to refer to a sermon that I heard from Bishop T.D. Jakes one time. And he spoke on an eagle. And when he spoke on the eagle, he meant that the mama eagle, when she's building her nest, she gathers all the sticks and twigs, whatever eagles use, and she builds them in a fashion that the inside of the nest is as comfortable and nice for the eaglets whenever they hatch as possible, with the sharp ends pointing outward to ward off any type of predators or anything. And they grow up in this, and they dwell in this, they feed in it, they sleep in it. This is their world. And as perfect as it may seem, at some point it turns into a bit of a curse when you think of it, because as they grow and as they get larger, the mama eagle, she'll begin to stir the nest. And what that means is, where the sharp parts were pointing outward, she'll turn them inward. And so where it used to be so comfortable for the eagle to sit right here, it's kind of getting poked. It's not so comfortable anymore. It doesn't feel right. It's outgrown its environment. It's outgrown its nest. We used to be able to hang with these certain people. We just don't feel right. We used to be able to talk like this, talk like that, but it doesn't feel right anymore. We've outgrown that stage in our life. And I can truly tell you, I can really relate to these eagles that are growing and they're so uncomfortable, because me going into my senior year in high school, things are getting pretty uncomfortable. I'll tell you that. Because I'm thinking on, what is it that God really has for me outside of my nest or my parents' house? I'm only 16 years old. I have no idea what it's like to be 17 years old. I don't know what it's like to graduate. If we're being honest, I don't know what it's like to not have to sneak into an R-rated movie at this point. I really don't. Apparently, it's illegal if you're not 17 yet. But I've done it. Either way. That's beside the point. And you're growing, and you're coming to a point where He's stirring your nest, and it's not to harm you. It's not to discourage you. It's to get you out of your comfort zone. You get what I'm saying? Because I'm so comfortable being in my parents' house. I'm so comfortable. Okay, I mess up. I can go, "Hey, Daddy, I don't know what happened," and he'll give me but he'll come and fix it. So everything's good. All is well. But when I get out of the house, I really don't know what I'm gonna do. At least not yet. But that's where faith comes in. If you would turn to Jeremiah 29:11. It's one of my favorite scriptures. And it reads, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." We as a church, we're going through a bit of a transition right now, if we haven't noticed. And we can't fall by the wayside just because things are starting to change. Just because God is stirring our nest, as you may see. Now, of course, Pastor Jones is a great man, maybe the wisest man I've ever spoken to. He's been here 50 some odd years, and some of us are so comfortable with how things were run by Pastor Jones when he was here. And maybe it's tradition, or maybe it's just we're so used to having that figure to tell us how we ought to run as a church. But how selfish would it be of us to fall by the wayside in his absence because he's not here? His works would have been in vain all these years had we not. His works would have been in vain because the same light and the same Jesus that dwells in Pastor Jones dwells in each and every one of us. And we have to realize that if we don't, and if we think that, wow, Pastor Jones, he was Pastor Jones, like this is a giant of a man. But do we forget that we have our own light to share too? We each have our own talents, just like God didn't bless that eagle with broad wings and a predator-like mentality just to sit in his nest. That would have been a waste. Just like he didn't bless us with his light to sit and look around like, man, what are we gonna do? Like, wow, what can we do? No, we ought to have faith that God, we're going through a transition right now. We're being stirred, but it's not to harm us, but it's to give us hope in the future. And it's a beautiful thing, it really is. And it's just, it's amazing because God, it's so good to us. He really is. Because he, while we were yet sinners, he gave us this light. Pastor Jones was here feeding us this light for 50 years, and look where we're at now. We're still surviving, and we're each dwelling and manifesting as a body in Christ. And it's beautiful. And when I said earlier, do not get too comfortable, I mean that because we can't be so comfortable with how Pastor Jones did everything that once he's gone, we fall by the wayside. We have to continue to grow. For a simple example, my parents, many of you really have been wearing the same shoes for years in perfect comfort. Probably the best pair of shoes you probably ever had. They still feel good. But the only reason you can still wear them is because your feet haven't grown anymore. Let your feet grow a little more and you're going to think like, man, what's wrong with you? I need to get me a new pair of shoes. You know? That happens to me, it seems like every year. I'm still doing that. But you see what I'm saying? We have to continue to grow. We can't, there's no retirement on being a believer. There's no retirement. Some of you have been here before Pastor Jones. Some of you have been here alive on this earth before Pastor Jones. I don't know what that's like, but some of you do. That doesn't mean you guys have stopped growing. You've continued to grow these many years. Little Caleb Pollard sitting around here, whether he's paying attention or not, I mean, he's probably still growing. I know it. Because he'll ask you a million questions. So we have to continue to have faith that we'll get the job done, even in Pastor's absence. And we each have our own light to share. And back to Matthew chapter 5, when it says that neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. We have this light. Why would we only share it with those who are in the church? They're already saved. Where we get out of our comfort zone is when we go and speak to people who don't know Christ, who don't want to know Christ to a certain degree, and who will cuss you out if you come to them and ask about, do you know Jesus? That's where you get out of your comfort zone. That's what we're intended to do. Why waste your light on talking to a light pole? I mean, it's already got its own light. It's already showing everybody its light. Pastor Jones didn't only pastor to Reverend Jefferson. Reverend Jefferson's already a Reverend Jefferson. You get what I'm saying? So we have to we have to continue to grow. But as I said, I'm only 16 years old, so what do I really know? But thank you.
Amen. What a blessing. Let's give these young people another hand. Come on, give it up for them. Come on. Amen.